In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons. But then there was fire, and with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. Then from the dark they came, and found the souls of the lords within the flame. Nito, the first of the dead, the witch of Izalith and her daughters of chaos, Gwyn, the lord of sunlight, and his faithful knights, and the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. With the strength of lords, they challenged the dragons. Gwyn's mighty bolts peeled apart their stone scales. The witches weaved great firestorms. Nito unleashed a miasma of death and disease, and Siath the Scaleless betrayed his own, and the dragons were no more. Thus began the Age of Fire. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. Even now there are only embers, and a man sees not light, but only endless nights. And among the living are seen carriers of the accursed dark sign. Yes, indeed, the dark sign brands the undead, and in this land the undead are corralled and led to the north, where they are locked away to await the end of the world. This is your fate.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Homegrown Nerds with your host,
Ace Lambertus.
And Bryce D. Young.
That, if you did not recognize it already, was the prologue to Dark Souls. The original Dark Souls game, a sequel to Demon Souls, and probably one of the hardest games of all time.
I wouldn't go that far.
Not really.
But one of the more profoundly
impactful games.
Impactful, that's better, yeah.
Very much known for its difficulty as well as its branching expanse of world design. Large as it is, it was also felt very claustrophobic and tight. Even while being large, it kept its eerie feeling throughout the entirety of its game, which is something some games struggle with a lot.
Yeah, because a lot of games like to try and copy that kind of mechanic, but it doesn't always hit it.
No. The formula worked so well that they went on to make a second one, which is more well-renowned, probably than the first, and a third one, which is more widely played than the other two.
Probably the most popular Dark Souls currently.
And everybody forgets Demon Souls.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that you can't really get it unless you play PlayStation.
Yeah, it is a game lost to the ages.
Yeah, but one day.
One day it will come back. Either way, it has created a almost genre in and of itself of Demon Souls-like games.
Mm-hmm.
They are very much heavily based in heavy stamina, quick rolls. Doesn't even have to be medieval motifs. It can be sci-fi or whatever, but the combat system has definitely come into its own and kind of made a lot of copycat games based on its mechanics.
Yeah, which a lot of people think it'd be easy to copy, but in reality it's not.
In reality, it's not. And a lot of those games end up just looking like poor knockoffs. Some do decent jobs, but in all fairness to Dark Souls, it is a strong mechanic, and they played well to it. The gameplay and everything worked well together and fed off of itself. A deep amount of lore and other assorteds kind of went into what created that original formula that worked so well, which they then built upon through the next few games. Ending in currently Dark Souls 3, which is probably more accessible than the first two Dark Souls.
Oh, by far.
As the difficulty curve, at least at the beginning, while hard, quotation marks, is not as hard as the difficulty curve was in the first game. Because I have played the first, and I have played the third.
You played the third more, right?
Yes, I have played the third more. I made it farther in the third than I did in the first. The first, I did not make it very far. I barely made it past, like, the intro plus a little bit of Firelink Shrine and onto the bridge leading into the city.
Oh, where the dragon is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made it there, and then I kind of just left off.
Never to return.
Never to return.
Until a time long forgotten.
Yeah. Either way, the difficulty curve is obvious to me, at least, in that Dark Souls 3 is hard. Very hard.
Mm-hmm.
The first, I guess you could say, the tutorial boss kicks a lot of people's butts.
Yeah, especially if you're new to the series.
Yes, if you're new to the series, it definitely does you some damage.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the gate crossing of you've got to be at least this high to ride this ride. You got to be at least this good to even start. That's not even including the sort of side boss that's off to the side that you can go fight, which is far and away harder.
I don't remember that. Is that where you can come back and do it, or can you just...
I can't remember if... I'm pretty sure you can come back and do it, but you first start the game, you enter in, you kind of follow the path, and it kind of branches off into two separate areas. Or there's a little side area off to the side, which the main thing is pointing you one direction, but there is a little side path. And some people will explore that side path just to see what's down there and find a boss that will destroy you.
I don't think I've ever seen that, so I guess that's one thing I missed.
Yeah. It's beatable. It is beatable. I've seen people beat it, and I've also heard of people beating it. So it is doable, but it is hard. We're talking like harder than... Being that you have very little equipment, very little everything, it's very hard because you don't have high DPS, you don't have high armor, you just have to be good at the game to beat it.
Have both skill and luck.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily, it's not required. It's a extra boss. In case you want to essentially challenge yourself to see if you can beat it. And some people don't get past it, so they don't move onwards because they want to beat it. Such is life.
Yeah, I have a friend that does that. That guy has done so many builds on Dark Souls 3 specifically. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. But even that first boss, though, once you get a feel for the controls and everything, and as long as you picked a decent class, not like one of the harder classes, as long as you picked a easier class, you will do just fine. You don't need supreme skill to beat it. If you need to, you can look up like walkthrough guides, but I would suggest playing the Dark Souls games without walkthrough guides.
At least at first.
One.
Yeah.
Especially the first one, as its sense of exploration is very intrinsical to its own gameplay. You don't want things spoiled for yourself. You want to try and find every nook and cranny. There are some things that I would suggest using walkthroughs for, like there are illusionary walls that you can hit with your sword and they'll disappear. Problem is, if you just go around hitting walls, your sword degrades and you do less damage, and getting back to those sections with a degraded sword is not always easy. And fighting off some of the enemies with degraded swords is not easy.
I think though in Dark Souls 1 at least, that's what happens with your weapons and armor. It degrades.
Yep.
And the only way you can fix that is if you repair it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure with I'm pretty sure Dark Souls 1 and 2 have that same system, but Dark Souls 3 was a lot more forgiving for that.
Yes. Dark Souls 3 was far more forgiving. Not to say it's not a hard game, but it was far more forgiving.
Yeah.
More people have beaten Dark Souls 3, I would guess, than at the very least Dark Souls 1. I'm not sure about Dark Souls 2 just because so many people beat that game just to show that they could beat it. And so they drowned hours and hours and hours in. I don't think Dark Souls 3 has quite that, what's the word, reputation that Dark Souls 2 had of get good. It still had a bit of that, but not quite as much as Dark Souls 2 had.
I get what you're saying.
So a lot more people attempted to beat and did beat Dark Souls 2, I would think, than actually ended up beating Dark Souls 3. But I could be very much wrong in that. I don't exactly have figures in front of me saying this is what happened.
Yeah, well, Dark Souls 2 had a weird mechanic that a lot of people, including me, did not like, and it involved the health bar. Whenever you died, it would take a small portion off. And that adds up quite a bit. The only way you can get rid of it is if you use a soul to not become hollow anymore.
Yep.
And when you're at the very beginning and you get killed like 5, 10, 11, 15...
The numbers go on and on and on.
Yeah, there's a cap where it'll stop, but once it gets to the point where it's like all they have to do is just smack you,
it's rough.
Yeah, that's what Dark Souls 2, that was its big thing.
Yep.
And it was a challenge.
Yes, and Dark Souls 3 is not quite as challenging, I would think. It may be so in the later levels. I have not played the later levels.
The DLC and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't even made it to a point where I could play the DLC. My
Fair
brothers
enough.
have. I have not. My attentions were focused elsewhere. But I digress. It was still far more accessible 3 than 2 was. But
yeah.
I have a feeling that more people beat 2 than have beaten 3. Just because the difficulty, some people like a challenge, and so they went out of their way when they normally wouldn't have played that style of game.
I'd say that's pretty fair.
Yep. And so with Dark Souls 3 being less of a challenge, I wonder if they really went out of their way to beat it or not. They might have, just for the bragging rights, but...
Then you have a whole different category of people that like do it on Guitar Hero controls, do it with a dance pad, whatever. That's when you get into the really high-graded challenge mode, hardcore, what other names you can think of.
Yeah. Those people are insane. I shouldn't say insane. They do that very much both for entertainment as well as a challenge. And they do a very good job of it.
Yeah.
It kind of goes down in history as just little things that happen, and sort of people remember the dude who beat Dark Souls with a fishing rod controller.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like, that's... They don't remember his name, but they remember there was a dude that beat it with a fishing rod.
Oh, gosh.
A fishing rod controller. And then DK Bongos and Guitar Hero controller.
There's some ridiculous people.
Why they did these challenges, I don't know. But, I mean, they wanted the challenge, and they want to just... Eventually, if you're good enough at a game, eventually you just get bored with it. Mm-hmm. Because you've done it so many times. I guess speedrunners generally have that challenge too, in that they have a tendency to finally putter out on a game. Just once you hit a certain level of skill, you can work on increasing your PB and maybe working towards that world record. But if you're up there with the world record, you could be increasing your PB, but in certain things, the PB has gotten so tight, so fine of, like milliseconds of difference between two world records, and a world record and the one below it, the former world record, that it's just insane. And so you switch games, you work on... Normally speedrunners will work on multiple games they're speedrunning, just to branch out and have other options so they don't get fully burnt out on one game. And so it kind of adheres itself to Dark Souls a little bit, that once you've played the game, you've pretty close to played all the games.
Yeah.
In Dark Souls. Like you said, with 2, there is a minor difference in that the mechanics. There's a difference in the mechanics in 1 as well as the mechanics in 3. But overall, it's the same idea of stamina bar, health bar, dangerous enemies.
Yeah.
Small corridors, compact areas designed to put you into a small box, and then put you into a small box with an enemy that can kill you in 2 hits.
Yeah, those are not the fun parts.
Yeah. But people like that challenge. So I guess it's a thing that they like to do, of challenging themselves in different ways, which is why they use different controllers. Mm-hmm. Or in the case of, I've talked about this before, The Legend of Zelda, they build a randomizer. Or in Super Mario, or any 2D Mario speedrunner, which is most Mario games, they will get into hacks, like Kaizo Mario, Super Dram World. Those, have you ever heard of Kaizo Mario?
No, but I think you're going to tell me later.
I'll show you some clips of the Kaizo Mario games, but essentially it's a really, really hard Super Mario World.
Okay.
with levels that involve frame perfect jumps, perfect grabs, trolls out the butt. Just things will kill you, and even the good speedrunners will die on these games.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, normally in a speedrun, a death would be considered like, that's it. That's the end of the speedrun. Turn it off, reset, start over. Depending on your speedrun, if you're running like any percent or full percent on a large game, then a death might happen. Or if you death warp, it's a thing. But as far as like Super Mario Bros. Games, normally a death is kind of your... You have a choice to make of either starting over or not. In these, a death can mean starting over, but for the most part, a death just can happen. It's something that world record speedruns can go through almost deathless, but still have the occasional death, just because of how hard they are.
Yeah, that's fair. Coming back to Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And I've heard challenges like the same thing for Dark Souls, to where you only get one life, and if you die, that's it. You have to restart. I've heard of those before.
Yeah. It adheres itself to those players' sense of challenge. They like that challenge. They like to be the best at the game, and have those bragging rights. And I can understand that. I don't think I will ever be one of those players.
Definitely not me.
But I can understand where they're coming from about being the best at something. And Dark Souls adheres itself very well to that mechanic of getting good, of being the best, of being able to go through the entire game swordless without dying once.
Those people.
Those people are insane.
Yes.
But they enjoy a challenge, because for normal games, which they do enjoy for pleasure, they enjoy playing games for fun. There's that certain itch that needs scratching, and Dark Souls does it well, which is why it has become so popular. Of throwing you into a hard gauntlet and saying, good luck.
You're going to need it.
You're going to need it.
That's what it turns into.
And also gives people bragging rights of saying they made it through a Dark Souls game. They beat a Dark Souls game. Or even just made it halfway through a Dark Souls game. Like, for me, just making it to the bridge, some people don't even make it to the bridge in Dark Souls 1. They can't get past that first demon on the wall.
I will say I was kind of one of those people. I want to say, at least for me specifically, I had a moment where I had to grind and grind and grind, and just about 3 times a week for 3 months, I would grind, in Dark Souls 1, I should say.
Yep.
I would grind so much that I had reached level 73.
Wow.
And I never even got to An Orlando.
Yep.
The city behind the wall.
And
when I beat those gargoyles, I could not believe how easily they were. I looked at myself in the mirror, put my controller down. I was like, why was it that easy? And then I thought to myself, I've been grinding so long.
Yep.
I grew a beard.
Exactly. You got good at the game.
Yeah.
You got good at the mechanics, the rolling, the dodging, everything, that grinding built up some skills, as well as just gave you better abilities in the game, better strength, better health, all of that, and it combined to make it an easy experience. Yeah. And you can do that with a Dark Souls game. You can grind your butt off, and it'll make it easier. Enemies will die quicker. Things will happen that allow you to survive better. But you have to sit there and grind one section for a whole bunch of souls, and you can't get very far with that, but you can get far enough to make the next section easier, and then grind there, and then make the next section easier and grind there.
Yeah.
And generally that's just what Dark Souls does anyway.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to replay sections, to go back and pick up souls that you dropped.
Or soul farming, as a lot of people call it.
Yeah. So you die, then you have to go back and collect those souls, hoping you don't die on the way there.
Yeah.
And then farm more souls, and then bring that back to the shrine or wherever. Upgrade your stuff, and then go out, kill more souls, make it farther, and then continue repeat process. If you're not very good at the game, that's generally what you will do.
Yeah.
That is what will happen. You will, and as long as you don't quit.
Yeah, that's the main thing. You don't quit.
You don't quit. Which brings up an interesting point. Rage quitting. The idea of the rage quitter. Sometimes I respect a rage quitter, just based on whatever game it is they quit from and why. Sometimes quitting from a game is just what you have to do. Either your motor skills are not up to par to be able to play that game, or it's not going to happen.
The game is so badly made, or some other thing, you can't get it to go, no matter how hard you can.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would fully call that rage quitting personally. It's just stepping back and going, I can't beat this, and I'm not going to beat myself up about it.
Yeah.
Rage quitting is when you get so frustrated with a game and its mechanics that you just quit before it even gets good.
Yeah, those are the bad ones.
Yes. And sometimes you can blame the game, but sometimes you can just blame yourself. That you have to be patient.
Yeah.
With a game to fully explore its depths. And Dark Souls is kind of like that. Now, it has good gameplay, so that making it and beating it on those hard difficulties, pretty good. You can do it. Well, Dark Souls doesn't have a hard difficulty. Dark Souls is Dark Souls. There is no normal, medium, hard. There's just Dark Souls, and then however you play it makes it as hard as you want it to be.
Actually, that's a really interesting thing you said, because the way Dark Souls... This is more towards Dark Souls 3, but the way Dark Souls difficulty is the specifically the way you play.
Yeah.
As you said.
Yeah.
Because you can go in there, you can be a wizard, or a sorcerer, I should say. Be a sorcerer, have range and all that, and you'll have the easiest time. But if you want a hard...
I would disagree on that.
Would you?
I know, because I played as a wizard.
Which one was I thinking of?
I don't know. It might be the first one, but the third one, I played as a wizard, and that was rough.
Okay, maybe it was Dark Souls 1 then. It's been a while since I realized this.
Yep.
But we'll just go ahead and say Dark Souls 1. The easy mode was having range, having magic, specifically miracles, and you would have the easiest time. But if you wanted a much more difficult time, which I chose by pure idiocracy, you can be pure melee, and have to deal with enemies that have ranged attacks.
Ugh.
I gave myself that challenge without realizing it, and I was making my life harder in Dark Souls 1
than it needed to be.
Yes, specifically because I would never, even NPCs, I would get the boss killed on my own without help. That was my challenge I did to myself.
Yeah.
I hated myself for it, but I told myself, I'm going to do it.
You're going to do it. And that's part of that challenge, but didn't you feel good when you completed it?
A big sigh of relief. 5 minutes, yes, I felt amazing.
You felt really good, and then you realized that there were still challenges ahead.
I got bitch slapped. That's literally it comes down to. I will be slapped so hard and thinking, I got this.
Yep.
That was my experience with Dark Souls.
Yeah, and I mean that's just part of the Dark Souls experience. I think is it's as hard as you make it to be, and just I mean you need to enjoy the world. If you really enjoy deep lore and going into codexes and looking on items for item descriptions that'll
because that's Dark Souls
build the lore
as the weapon stuff.
Yep. And I'm not super into that, personally speaking, so I don't get that full experience from Dark Souls. Mostly because my thing is more of collectathon rather than dealing in lore.
I gotcha.
Which I suppose it could be. It's starting to be that way of just enjoying the lore of games, but mostly collectathon style. With the amount of time I have allocated to me, I spend it playing certain games that I know will be not necessarily easy, but I know that I can beat and enjoy beating them. There are a few games that currently I'm using walkthroughs to beat, not necessarily because I don't want to, or not necessarily because I can't play them like vanilla.
Yeah.
But I just feel I don't have the time constraints to play them normally, but I still want to say that I've played them.
Yeah.
And enjoy them. And once I've 100% beat it, I'll probably go back and then play it again. This time without the walkthrough, or maybe just using the walkthrough less and less until I got a good grasp on the game and I can play it without.
Yeah, it's kind of the effect of like what we talked about before, like Warframe and what was the other game we talked about?
Mass Effect.
Mass Effect, yeah.
Yeah. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. Normally, what I used to do was just play a game vanilla, and then once I beat it, then I'd go back and collect everything that I could collect, and be content. But with time constraints and some games being really long, I don't want to do a whole lot of backtracking. So I've taken to doing some walkthroughs on some things just to 100% complete them. Which there are games that I will play my normal way, which play vanilla and then beat it with a walkthrough after I've nearly beat it or completely beat it. But, I mean, there are some things that just due to time constraints, I still want to experience the game, but I also want to beat it. But I would still encourage at least a vanilla playthrough up to a certain point of Dark Souls. I would do it myself as well. It's just a vanilla playthrough because you get that experience of... Part of the experience of Dark Souls is that exploration of moving forward, and Dark Souls 1 does a good job of it. Dark Souls 3 Not really. I'm not sure about Dark Souls 2. But
like,
Dark Souls 1 loops back on itself consistently, bringing you back to Firelink Shrine, to certain areas that you can then branch off of, and delving down and down and down into Blight Town, and then down underneath Blight Town.
Blight Town. Hated Blight Town so much.
That's a trek that you have to make. It's going a journey, and it's a sense of loneliness and a sense of just utter despair as you continue to make your way farther down. You're farther and farther from the nice, easy depths above. But there's something about that exploration down into the depths that is just, I don't know. It's intriguing. It's enticing. You know it's going to be hard, but you also want to see what's down there. And Dark Souls give you a chance to do that.
Yeah, it gets your inner adventuring spirit.
Yeah.
I would also have to say, though, you will definitely have your own sense of dread at the same time. As a player.
Yeah, as a player, like, you're constantly on the edge of your seat. You're like, will I lose my souls? Will I lose my progress made? Like, and Dark Souls will kill you.
Yeah.
It's what happens.
Yeah, it's not nice.
You just have to learn to deal with that difficulty. And it just, I don't know, it makes more resilient gamers out of it. Which is a very good thing in this day and age. As a lot of people don't have that thick skin, having a game where you have to build a thick skin against being angry, against being upset, against being, how best to put this, just against being done with something. And instead persevering and giving a sense of steadfastness. It makes for a very good learning experience for people. Which is interesting of a concept of a game teaching you a life lesson.
Yeah. Not like a lot of games anymore where it's like going into life surfaces. It's only there to be fun. Dark Souls, at its very core, is teaching you something valuable that you will, honestly, if you think about it, you're going to take it for granted if you don't learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. The idea behind getting good, while the internet makes fun of it, is not a bad thing. A lot of people will say that mastery comes from failing, of knowing how to fail at something over and over and over in so many different ways that you finally learn how to do it right. Then you are what could be considered a master of it. As you know every way to, in this instance, every way to die.
Yeah.
You know every way to die because you've been there.
At every single point.
Yeah. But for that sort of idea, I heard it once from a scientist. He said he learned so much and learned how to research so much by constantly doing things over and over and over and failing at them, so that he knew what didn't work, and that slowly eliminated the process of what did work. And over that, he gained mastery of that idea. It's the same thing with anything in life, really, as a discipline. You have to discipline yourself to be consistent, to be moving forward to constantly be working at these things towards that mastery. To be able to say, I've done this so much and I've failed at this so much that now I can say that I am a master of this. To say that you have come so far and failed so much that you now know the right way, but you can also show people what you did, how you got to this point. If someone goes and fights a boss and dies to it, and you can relate to that because you were in that chair once.
Yeah.
And you can help teach them and encourage them to keep moving forward, just keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting that fight, and eventually you will reach the end of that fight. You tear and claw through, and eventually you reach a level of mastery to where you can play Dark Souls in its intended form, which is without a walkthrough, with just going in and exploring the world, enjoying the world, beating it however and in any order, fighting all of the side bosses, completely exploring the place to its fullest, because you have that level of mastery necessary to explore those depths. It equates well to, and I think people will understand where I was getting with that, it equates well with life, of mastering something to the point of being able to just say, I have mastered this, and be able to do it.
Instinctively.
And do it well. Yes, instinctively. Mastering both. It basically applies to any skill there is. And as internet heavy as the get good is, it also creates an idea of sometimes you just gotta get good.
Yeah.
You gotta keep banging your head against that wall. Eventually it'll break. Or you will. And depending on how hard that wall, either you will break first or it will. But Dark Souls teaches you to, instead of continually banging your head against that wall, it teaches you to pick at it little by little. Get better, get better, get better, get better. And eventually you got the skills necessary to break through that wall.
In my case, I got a pointier hat. That was my method.
A pointier hat. All fear the pointy hat. But that equates well with life. And I think that is to its betterment. And to say it is good at that is, I mean, I would say that with Dark Souls, it's very much, it's a good game, both because of its atmosphere, of its lore, of how much love and effort was put into it, but as well as it's a good game as it builds character. It is an experience. All right. Pause for a cause. All right, we're back. Sorry. That might have been like no time for you, but for us, it was just a little bit.
Yeah.
Things happen.
But as we were saying.
So it very much builds that character, which is not something a lot of games do. Have a life lesson sitting behind them. And that is to its benefit.
Especially with the live service mentality a lot of games are having now.
Yeah. Which I'm not saying that all games should teach a life lesson.
Right.
That just becomes a
Tedious
and just it's something that not everything needs to have a life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Some things can just be there for the fun of it.
Mario, for instance.
Mario, yeah, it's there. It's fun. It's simple and enjoyable.
Yeah.
Beating a Mario game isn't super hard. Some of the older ones were a little harder, but even those, I mean, they weren't bad.
Yeah.
As long as you had a little bit of patience. But, I mean, it's good to see a game that kind of, not even on purpose, teaches a life lesson.
Yeah.
As I said, not all games need to do that because sometimes you just need an escape. And video games are good at that. Dark Souls is good at letting off stress as well. If you're good enough at the game,
if you're good enough,
you can. It's an outlet for anger that is apart from yelling at people. You can get angry with a game instead of getting angry with people.
True.
You can release those angry thoughts into a game.
Because when you're, at least with NPC wise, it's a slow, methodical process that lets you let it out. Just slap them, whap them, and all that.
Yep. It's not a good idea to use it necessarily as a crutch for anger, because you have to be able to still let go of that anger. You can't keep holding it in. But, I mean, it's not a bad stress reliever.
Mm-hmm.
As well as it entails to the idea of the fairy tale. A method of escape. You enter into a different world apart from your own with different rules and just disappear into it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something video games can do very well.
Yeah.
And Dark Souls does that good job of creating that atmosphere. Whether it's 1, 2, 3 or Bloodborne or Demon Souls.
Yeah, we did talk about Bloodborne, but it's under the same premise.
Yeah, and by the same people essentially.
Yeah.
But each game is distinct to itself, and each game, while maybe connected lore-wise, except for Bloodborne,
mm-hmm.
It all is its own experience.
Yeah.
You have some throwbacks to old areas from older games in the newer games, but even then, that experience is different. It's changed. It's not the same. So, I mean, to digress down a little bit, Dark Souls is an experience you can only experience yourself.
It's a badge for a lot of gamers, too, that says, I'm a good gamer because I beat Dark Souls.
Yep. I have this mastery.
Mm-hmm.
It's your badge of saying, it was rough, but I beat it. And it's okay if you don't have that badge, but it's also cool if you do have that badge.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want that badge, you're going to have to work for it. That's just a fact of life.
Yeah. Especially if you want all 3 of those badges from all 3 of those games.
You're going to have to work.
Yeah.
You're going to have to put in the time and put in the effort to get it done if you want those badges. But switching back to the life lesson, anything worth doing is worth doing to fulfillment.
Yep.
And having that badge of mastery it is what it is.
Mm.
It's something saying, I put the effort in, I put the time in. Look at that. I did it. I can show my work, essentially.
Yeah. And then you could take it to the next level and go PvP.
Yeah.
But that's completely different.
That's a completely different section, and
honestly, we don't really have much time for that.
No, we don't. Which brings the point we're getting close to final thoughts.
Before we do final thoughts, one thing that we did not do that a lot of people like to talk about, bosses.
Ah, yes.
Favorite bosses that you fought against or know how they work. Because I know neither of us have technically beaten a Dark Souls game all the way through. And there are some places where there are hidden bosses that we've never even thought about going to.
To me, it would probably be... There's a couple ones. There was the Bridge Demon from Dark Souls. Or not Bridge Demon, the
Dragon?
Taurus Demon.
Taurus Demon. Ah.
Yeah, on the wall leading to the bridge. I banged my head against that dude so many times and then kind of cheesed him on accident.
No.
He jumped off the jumped off the wall.
How dare you?
It happened. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened.
Even I was able to not throw him off, man.
I think eventually I did have to go back and beat him, and that was a good experience.
Okay, as long as you went back.
Yeah, and actually beat him for real. The one that immediately came to mind when you said that was the first technical boss of Dark Souls 3. Not the tutorial boss.
Oh.
But the big hulking ice monster wolf thing. I don't remember what his name is.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay, he's the one that you beat right before you hold up the flag and the little creepy things come grab you.
Oh,
in the big chamber, and he charges Vort.
Yes. Okay.
Because of pretty much the same reason as the first one, is that I was playing as a sorcerer or wizard or whatever, and let me tell you, that fight's rough.
Yeah,
that fight is rough as a wizard.
I could definitely see it, because even for me, I had an easier time because I had a shield with me, and I could get hit and not fall on my ass.
Well, and for a sorcerer, you have to charge your shot, and when you're charging, you're moving slow.
Yeah.
If at all. And then you go, boom. And then you have to roll or dodge or hope you didn't get hit.
Yeah, the charging definitely made sorcery a really difficult one in Dark Souls 3.
Yes, it's hard to get that timing down of having that timing of saying, okay, I got enough time. And so beating that boss with a sorcerer was a badge of honor for me.
Damn right.
It was saying I went through that hell and came out on the other side victorious. That's just what happened.
So those are your top two, huh?
Those are my top two.
All right, fair enough.
What about you?
Ooh. We'll start with Dark Souls 3, because I got one in Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3, the most fun, interesting, and overall beautiful dancer of the valley.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone hates her due to the fact that she is a pain in the butt to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I try and fight her, I eventually beat her. But when you fight her, she is so graceful. And it's like the music that comes with it is so beautifully haunting that I fell in love with her so hard.
Yep.
It was like watching a swan slowly do a ballet and then stab you in the butt.
And then stabbing you in the butt.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the second one always had a good place in my heart, mostly because of the unique interaction. Crossbreed Priscilla from the Painted World. Because out of all the bosses, at least from my experience and knowledge, out of all the bosses, you actually have an option to fight her or not.
Yep.
Not like don't have to do that entire world. You actually go to the boss fight, and she will give you a choice whether to fight her or go through the portal and leave all be.
Yep.
Also, she's a cutie. I can't help myself.
Yep. Yeah, I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those are very good bosses.
Yeah.
Very memorable bosses. And that's something that Dark Souls does good at. The twin warriors, the twin golden warriors, the one big and fat and the other one.
I think
skinny.
it was like Ogren and Strom? No, that's not it.
Anyway, but both of those are very memorable as well.
Ornstein. Smog and Ornstein, that's what it was.
Smog and Ornstein?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not 100% sure, so.
No, it just clicked in my mind because it was at the tip of my tongue.
Yep. Those were both rough bosses.
Yeah, especially if you do it a certain way.
Yep.
I haven't fought them yet, but I've heard stories. Anyway, we're getting off track.
Yeah, we're getting off track. Okay, so after the bosses, final thoughts.
Final thoughts for me with the series as a whole is definitely an experience to behold. Something every gamer should experience, definitely. Even if it's Dark Souls 3. At least one of the games you have to experience just so you can get that idea and enthusiasm that most gamers get.
Yep.
With that game. I think that would be my final thoughts.
My final thoughts would probably be somewhat along those same lines of experiencing it, but also saying that you don't have to beat it. I haven't beaten it, you haven't beaten it, but we know people that have beaten it. But just playing it was still an experience. And you don't walk away necessarily upset that you walk away. Because you're like, I played it, I had an experience, but I don't either have the time, the energy, or anything to put into the game that this game requires. But still saying that you have those badges of honor, that you made it so far into the game. Saying, I did this. You made it to the Painted City. You made it to... you made it through Vort playing as a sorcerer. You did all these things, and they are experiences that stick with you for a long time. Things that crop up, and just... It's an experience that sticks with you. Some things you will forget. Dark Souls is one of those things that is an experience you remember. It has very good level design, very good enemy types, very good gameplay overall. But it's a beast. It is a beast to behold. But it is a good experience to have nonetheless. So those would be my final thoughts.
Well, that's a thorough one, that's for sure.
In which case, we're going to go ahead and sign off.
Alrighty, I guess we'll see y'all later.
Bye. Bye.